Hello everyone! So I want to talk about a few high-end luxury brands that make me pause. Things that just make me a little suspicious, and sometimes I don't even really know why. Sometimes that's just how it is. Sometimes a thing, a brand, a person, a product may just not quite sit right with you and you may not entirely know why, and maybe you find out later, or maybe it was just something you made up in your head the entire time. So I thought that I would just go through some of these things because I've been thinking about this lately, and I thought that I would start with high-end brands in particular and kind of just gauge people's opinions on this sort of video. So definitely let me know at the end if you would like to see more like this. And just a quick brief little disclaimer at the beginning, as I feel like I always have to do with these kind of videos, but it's not personal. It's really not about you. It's about my opinions, my impressions, and my feelings about these brands. So please try not to take it personally, because it really isn't a personal attack. And I'm not claiming to know every little detail about the brands I'm talking about. This is really just an opinion thing, and if there were any sort of things that I didn't touch on regarding these brands and you feel like it would be important and you want to let people know and want to let me know, please leave it in the comments. Okay, so that's it. That's the disclaimer. Hopefully that gets through to you. If this doesn't sound like the kind of video that you would like, you're free to go. All right, so we're gonna start with brand number one, and we're just gonna go alphabetically. And the first brand, and the whole reason why I wanted to do this video in the first place, is Benefit. Benefit was one of the first higher end brands that I experienced. It was one of the first that was more accessible, being a brand that was sold at Shoppers Drug Mart, which is a drugstore slash beauty store in Canada. It's kind of changed over the years, and they have a lot more higher end products in their beauty boutique now. But like when I was growing up, we had department stores and like MAC and like the handful of stuff that Shoppers had, because we didn't have Sephora's and that kind of stuff. So Benefit was one of those first brands that I got accustomed to seeing in person, as well as reading about in magazines, because I feel like Benefit was really popular and really pushed, and like places like Sephora really seemed to push Benefit quite a bit. So a lot of the first higher end products I purchased were from Benefit. So the first thing that really sticks out to me about why I got annoyed with Benefit was an ad campaign they ran that was skip class, not concealer. And I know there was a lot of backlash towards this, and I just thought this was really irresponsible and just really not appropriate marketing, especially because like I feel like Benefit really is a brand that appeals to young people, and I don't feel like it's like teen girls kind of a thing. So I don't feel like advocating to skip class is a good thing. Like there's something about it that really irritated me on that kind of level, and I haven't been able to let that go. And then there were all the brand trips that Benefit did a few years ago, when brand trips were all the rage. I feel like Benefit was really one of those brands that did a lot of brand trips. And those always make me hesitant because, I mean, look at the brand trips that influencers went on. Look at the products they promoted. Do they still talk about them now? Do they still even talk about the brands, right? So it's just something that seemed like a really uncomfortable marketing ploy that I feel like a lot of people fell for, because a lot of people were purchasing a lot of the stuff that influencers were raving about while they were on their fancy vacations. Also, and I don't mean to be just like tagging this on at the end, their shade range is absolutely abysmal, and it has been for a while. Like I believe there was like light, medium, and dark, which really wasn't very dark for the longest time, and there really isn't like a focus on their complexion products right now. I feel like Benefit has been trying to really be about brows, and kind of everything else sort of been a little secondary. But I feel like the products and the packaging is stale. Like I know they did a revamp kind of that went along with those brand trips, so like the brow packaging, but I feel like in general it just doesn't feel fresh like it used to. And like I really want to love that whole like SoCal vibe and some of their packaging, but to me it doesn't have that sort of retro kitschy kind of cool thing that I like in some other just decor things, not just specifically makeup packaging. But there's just something about it that feels dated and not in a cool, like retro throwback kind of way. So I just feel this sort of like mild annoyance when it comes to Benefit, just a little annoyed. The next brand is Chantecaille, Please Don't Kill Me. So the first thing about this brand is that it's ridiculously priced. I would potentially go as far to say ridiculously overpriced, but that's kind of subjective. But I feel like it's very expensive, and I don't feel like it's given the same sort of treatment as other high-end luxury brands where like the price point kind of comes up. This is kind of like, well, it's luxury, so it's acceptable. Kind of irritates me. Like, this is one of those things that I feel like comes up when people talk about it. So I just got kind of annoyed hearing people justify the price point of the product. So this is a scenario where I wasn't initially annoyed by the brand itself, but like the people who were talking about the brand. It's kind of like when I stopped watching Supernatural because the fandom completely ruined it for me. So like, I've never tried Chantecaille products, so I'm not critiquing what the products are like. I'm simply talking about like what the brand's sort of appearance and my general impressions from like seeing it online. I just can't shake the feeling that it's a brand for rich white people. Probably because it was a brand founded by a family of rich white people. So like the whole thing with the charitable donations, like to me that just seems like such an old white person kind of thing. It's so terrible. I'm sorry. But that's just the impression that I get from this. And I'm not saying anything bad about the work that they've done. They are such outspoken, like the whole, like the Chantecaille brand, the founder, Sylvie Chantecaille, like she's so vocal about animal charities and you know, rescues and all these funds, and it's fantastic. Like, I'm not critiquing that in any shape or form. I'm just saying it feels a little weird because charitable donations made by a brand would then be tax deductions. You know, it's one of those well-known things that wealthy people do to get out of paying more taxes is they donate to charity. And how much actually gets donated? This is one thing that I can't actually find numbers. Like every now and then a charitable organization that they donated to will say how much they received, but I couldn't really find a lot of this information easily. Like I spent probably about an hour trying to find information about how much they donate and how much they donate like yearly, or what their like proceeds are, and like what percentage of their sales do they donate. I couldn't really find that information. Like it seemed to really vary from anywhere from 5% of net proceeds, so that's like the embossed blushes. 5% of the net proceeds of those blushes go to like dedicated charities, but 5% of the net proceeds isn't going to be a whole lot. And then there was other various things depending on products. I think I came across one that was 100% proceeds, which is kind of rare, and that's usually like really heavily advertised if that's how much it is. And I don't think all of their products include like a donation to a certain charity. Like there was one article I read where they had like a $50 US lipstick, and with the purchase of every lipstick they would donate a tree to be planted in Kenya, which is great. And then I went to like see how much it would cost to donate a tree. It's $1. So I just feel a little weird. Like it just feels like an excuse to buy makeup. Nothing wrong with that, I guess. It's just a weird thing to me, and I just feel kind of uncomfortable that like total amounts aren't really disclosed as to like how much does 5% of that $55 blush equal, like a donation wise, like how much actually would get donated. I don't know. And I just wish that they were a little clearer on that, because it's just one of those things that just, like I said, the whole point of this video, weird vibes. So anyway, moving on, Charlotte Tilbury. So this is entirely because I've read interviews with Charlotte Tilbury herself, who sleeps with makeup on. She doesn't want like her husband to see her bare face. She would like take her whole makeup off at the end of the day and then like put more makeup on. Definitely eyeliner and all this. I just don't get it. To me, that was such a weird message, and it doesn't seem very empowering and like very like at first, like, I thought Charlotte Tilbury's makeup line was like this very like bold, empowering, like sort of like sex kitten kind of thing that, you know, you're in control and you do what you want, not like oh my god, I can't sleep next to my partner because I'm not wearing makeup and what will they think of me? Like, it's such a weird thing and I cannot ever get that out of my mind. And also the whole thing with the Kim KW lipstick, like that felt like sponsorships that weren't really disclosed, because I felt like everybody was saying the same thing. When that lipstick became really popular, it was like in every like influencer's favorites and they all said the same thing, and then nobody's talked about it since. It was just such a weird thing. It just really felt like one of those things that was really kind of heavily pushed, and it felt like it made me think, there's something going on here, and then it made me notice it because I kept hearing like the same sort of like buzzwords over and over again. This isn't to say that I'm not curious about some Charlotte Tilbury products, and I've talked many times about wanting to try the Hollywood Flawless Filter, but that's one big reason, or multiple reasons I guess, why I've been hesitant to actually spend the money on the brand. Next, Hourglass. So I feel like more people have been speaking out about Hourglass recently, and I feel like a little vindicated in a weird way. Not that I ever strongly disliked Hourglass, but I always had weird skin reactions to the product, so I was definitely envious of people who like were pulling off that beautiful like hourglass glow and just like, you know, we're all blushed and glowy and whatever. I know a lot of people talked about their foundation sticks and really liking them, and I think the shade range is decent. I don't feel like I'm justified in really saying that definitively, but I feel like there's like a good gradient of shades there. I feel like people's reactions to that have been pretty good, but what I've heard a lot about recently, and what I completely agree with, is the holiday blush palette. So like they do the same sort of style holiday blush palettes every year, and it's not one size fits all. It really isn't. Not with these blushes and stuff. Like the same sort of blush that's going to work on a lighter skin tone isn't going to work on a darker skin tone, and I don't know why they wouldn't come out with a second blush palette. Have one for lighter skin, have one for darker skin. Like, I don't know why they are resisting being so inclusive, but I do get this sort of exclusive kind of vibe from them. Hourglass makes me think of Regina George, and I'm sorry, that might be a weird comparison, but that's the feeling that I get from the brand. Is I feel like almost like they think that they are better than everybody else. Their social media is weird. Like I was on their Instagram and they don't get a lot of engagement on their posts. They don't seem to respond or acknowledge comments, which is weird. I wouldn't be surprised if they're actually deleting things, but there's a lot of useful feedback, and I feel like they need a like dedicated, competent social media person to gather all of this feedback and really acknowledge it properly, because these are consumers or potential consumers. Because I think the biggest thing is there's a lot of people who feel like they can't use these products because it wouldn't work for them, and they want to. Like there's a lot of people who would buy the blush palette if they created it to suit darker skin tones, and I don't know why Hourglass is completely overlooking this, because there is so much more they can do. Like it's just not enough to have a relatively inclusive foundation line. Like that's great, but that's not where it ends. And I feel like for a lot of brands, that's what they think. They're like, they'll have their 30 to 50 foundation shades and be like, ta-da! And then they don't consider their other products as well. And it's really frustrating. And I feel like Hourglass is just a real perfect example of that. And also, I am just a little petty because I have had that weird feeling about them for such a long time, where I'm just like, there's something there, and I just hope that they deal with it. I just really, really hope that they deal with it. And I know a lot of people like Hourglass a lot. Huda Beauty is the next brand, and Huda Beauty is one of those brands that I feel like gets canceled every 5 minutes. So I'm not as much into the like online makeup scene like I was in the past. Like I'm not circling like the makeup forums and like trolling the new releases and all this kind of stuff. So I feel like I missed some of the feedback and some of like the controversies that come out over brands and products. But when I was really heavily involved, there was always something going on with Huda Beauty or Huda Catan. And I feel like that's a problem with these sort of influencer brands, like when you have a brand that's so heavily involved with the creator, the founder, the face, who's a social media presence, you can run into a lot of trouble, because I find like a lot of these social media people don't really have a filter, and then they say and do some pretty dumb stuff. I know specifically there have been a lot of like articles, reposts, like tutorial reposts and image reposts that have been very questionable. I know that there have been some accusations of colorism, for example. I know that's just one thing, but there have been many sort of situations like this. There was brand drama between Huda Beauty and Fenty, and with Huda and a beauty bakery, just to name a couple. Like, I just feel like there's been more than one thing. For me, the last product I purchased from Huda Beauty was a 9-pan eyeshadow palette, which was probably the worst eyeshadow I've ever used. So even though people still rave about those little 9-pan palettes from Huda Beauty, I'm not tempted in the slightest. Although I do wonder what like the general consensus is on this brand, because I feel like it goes so back and forth, and I feel like it's not as wildly criticized, and if you support it as like a content creator, I don't feel like you're canceled alongside. Like, that definitely happens with Jefferson Starship, but like if content creators are like reviewing and doing tutorials with the 9-pan palettes, I don't feel like the reception and reaction is the same. So I'm not sure how people feel, or if it's one of those things that people are just kind of like strongly in denial of, kind of like a Kat Von D kind of situation where there was a lot of people with their blinders on kind of being like, but I like the product, so we're just going to pretend all this other stuff doesn't exist until it's so obvious in your face that there's no way you can deny it. Maybe. Perhaps. Anyway, the last brand I'm going to talk about, speaking of Jefferson Starship, I can't believe that the same man who wrote your song and Tiny Dancer wrote We Built This City. Anyway, but seriously, I'm not talking about J-Star himself, but I'm talking about Jouer. So I've mentioned before that I've been curious about the Jouer blushes and highlighters, and I've wanted to try it, but one of the big reasons why I have stayed away from Jouer is because of the collaboration they did with He Who Should Not Be Named a couple of years ago. It was just one of those, it was such an odd collaboration in the first place. Like Jouer and J-Star, like I don't get it. It didn't make sense. Like the only good thing about the whole thing was that apparently 100% of the proceeds were donated to charity, so that's good. But I could go on forever about my issues with that specific collaboration, but basically it just seemed kind of like desperation, and like they really just wanted publicity, whether it was good press or bad press, regardless of anything else. And so again, it's just one of those things that kind of lingers in my mind when I'm like, I want to try Jouer, and then I just remember all that stuff and I'm like, maybe not, maybe I'll try something else. Now, I did come across, when I was sort of like quickly fact-checking some of my stuff, I came across this article from Jouer, and I want to share this quote because I did find it pretty interesting, especially because I have seen and heard other people talk about how they haven't really heard from Jouer. Like Jouer had those brand trips as well, those questionable brand trips and those weird collaborations, and then they have been kind of silent, like online. So this is the quote. The company is rethinking its entire content creation strategy. In the past, Zilber, the CEO, said they have relied heavily on their Instagram influencer fans to curate the visual content element. And while that strategy does effectively move the product further and wider than it might otherwise, it needs some balancing out. Because ultimately, letting third parties create the product's visual storytelling aspect meant that story was in some aspect getting away from the brand. That strategy also changed the brand's image a bit, as influencers tended to showcase very stylized versions of Jouer Cosmetics makeup. While that is wonderful and attention-getting, it is also a bit at odds with the brand's core aesthetic of French minimalist. So I think that kind of explains a little bit why they've kind of pulled back. I'm guessing that there's less sponsorship and potentially less PR. I don't know for certain, but I'm just guessing. Because I know that like a lot of content creators, like they're going to talk about the stuff that they get. They're not always going to go buy stuff, especially if their audience isn't recommending it, and if they're trying a different route and trying to target a different like demographic and audience than people who would be on social media, then those people aren't going to be requesting that their favorite content creators purchase the jouet stuff, so they're not going to, and so on. So anyway, I just thought that was kind of interesting. It doesn't fully change my opinion of the brand, but it makes me curious to think about like what it will look like in a couple of years' time. And that is everything. Are there any brands that you feel weird about? I would really love to know any high-end brands that you feel sort of weird vibes from. And don't worry, I won't feel bad either if it's a brand that I really love. Don't worry about it. But I'm really curious, and I'd love to know your thoughts about these brands that I talked about as well. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? I love having really great civil conversations, so please let me know your thoughts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I hope we get a chance to chat soon. Bye for now.